The Browns' collapse began long before the judge's decision, even before the incessant lawsuits splashed across the front pages. It started quietly, in the recesses of their own home, where seemingly innocuous choices sowed the seeds of ruin. When news of Robyn's nanny first reached the fans, the anger was instant. Why, the viewers wanted to know, would an already stretched, thin family hire someone to care for children at $80,000 a year when there were several adults at home? What the world did not know was that this was not just a questionable expenditure. It was a distraction. Behind closed doors, the Browns were wrestling with something much more sinister: the construction of what Kody referred to proudly as their nest egg. Kody sold it to his wives as the family safety net, a pot of money to ensure a secure future. What he omitted was how the fund was organized, who actually controlled it, and how rapidly it started hemorrhaging money. Christine and Janelle quietly complained that their family budgets were dwindling while unexplained withdrawals showed up on shared accounts. Mary, already relegated to being cut out of most family business, saw her access to financial conversations dwindle to nothing. Robyn, on the other hand, became Kody's go-to confidante, speaking in hushed tones of investments and long-term strategies that no one else ever got recorded. The nanny's wage was but the prologue to an act of fiscal irresponsibility. Payments poured in continuously: mortgage payments, private school fees, high-end purchases, and what certain insiders later characterized as busyness ventures without a business plan. Each was done in the name of securing the future of the family, but month after month, the so-called nest egg grew less cushiony and increasingly crater-like. And when attorneys eventually came after records, what they found sent shockwaves through the court: more than $300,000 quietly siphoned off in less than 2 years' time. Signed off by Kody himself. But by then, the cracks were just beginning to appear. As Christine would eventually testify, the nanny was just the smoke. The fire was already lit, and it was our whole family heritage on the line. The nest egg increased, or at least seemed to increase. So Kody started making himself out to be a visionary. He boasted to anyone who would hear him that he was creating generational wealth, a fund that would cover all 18 of his kids long after the cameras stopped rolling. But within the family, rumors became questions. Janelle realized that her own savings account felt strangely depleted. Christine griped that money, that was supposed to be paid to her for home expenses, never showed up, and Mary, already relegated to the periphery, was coldly refused access to any records of accounts. The reality was only exposed later in court, where investigators traced the money. What they found was alarming: a trend of clandestine withdrawals, sometimes in the tens of thousands, flowing into accounts that were solely controlled by Kody and Robyn. Some were referred to as household expenses, others as busyness ventures. But all of them were unlike anything that existed for the family's actual expenditures. Indeed, almost $150,000 was found to have flowed into luxury items, designer furniture, jewelry, and even what sources characterized as collectibles, and which had no resale value. But the withdrawals continued. At least $90,000 were funneled into so-called failed investments, speculative ventures, usually presented by friends with no history of success and approved by Kody in private. Christine, who was surprised when she found out about these outlays, allegedly informed the court, "We weren't building a nest egg. We were filling a hole with gold and then putting it in the fire." The most incriminating disclosure was the fact that a second account, a secret one under a trust name owned by Kody and Robyn only, was found. It was here that the greatest amounts disappeared. $120,000 came in. Less than $15,000 stayed. When pushed by the judge, Kody asserted these were family expenses. But when receipts materialized detailing expensive vacations, exclusive shopping trips, and even mortgage payments on a mansion, the courtroom gasped. Bartain, for years, Kody had been keeping up the pretenses, appearing on television as a struggling but resourceful patriarch, while behind the scenes moving money around like pawns on a chessboard. But the court wasn't playing chess. Judge and jury members alike were shown binders full of bank statements, trust documents, and wire transfers that told a much different story about the Brown family finances. Christine's lawyer began the case with this scathing remark: "This was not a nest egg. It was a shell game. Money was shuffled, hidden, and spent with no intention of protecting the family." Janelle testified next, and her testimony stung. She exposed how she was coerced into cashing in one of her own retirement accounts, on the assurance that the money would be contributed to the savings of the family. But when she requested statements, she was informed that the records were complicated and not her concern. That retirement account down the drain in 6 months, devoured by the unknown trust Kody and Robyn managed. The nanny wage appeared again in testimony as well. Attorneys claimed it wasn't childcare, it was optics. By holding attention on a contentious but explicable expenditure, the Browns diverted spectators and even relatives away from the much greater amounts quietly going missing behind shut doors. Mary, looking strained on the witness stand, confessed that she was excluded from all financial conversations and only discovered the magnitude of the losses when detectives subpoenaed the accounts. But the biggest bombshell was when the judge asked Kody to describe the secret trust. Cornered, Kody had maintained the money went towards family business expenses. But receipts painted a different picture. A $25,000 jewelry buy, $40,000 towards renovations on Robyn's mansion home, and even payments tied to private vacations masquerading as busyness retreats. The courtroom erupted into shocked silence. Then, the judge, clearly upset, termed Kody's defense an insult to the court's intelligence. From that point on, the momentum changed. What had started as rumors of mismanagement now resembled an intentional course of dishonesty. Christine's attorney jumped on the opportunity, stating, "If this were any other man, it would be called fraud." And that is what it is here. And yet, as damning as these revelations were, the full extent of the Browns' financial meltdown was yet to come. Because what the investigators uncovered next didn't simply reveal mismanagement. It uncovered a degree of betrayal that would leave the entire family irreparably broken. As the proof mounted, the courtroom was no longer a room of law, but a theater where long-suppressed anger finally came out. For Christine, each new document opened was a vindication of what she had long known, that her sacrifices, her devotion, and even her silence had been taken advantage of. When she testified to cutting corners to feed her children while tens of thousands were being poured into Robyn's mansion mortgage, her voice trembled, but her determination never faltered. "We were told this was for the family," she explained. But it was always for them. Janelle's outrage stood in stark contrast to Christine's silent agony. She explained how she had placed her trust in Kody not only with her savings but with her aspirations for stability, only to find those aspirations traded away in backroom deals. Perhaps the most heartbreaking was when Janelle explained selling her own house, thinking the money would pay for property for all the wives. Instead, court records showed nearly half of that money had been redirected into luxury expenses, including a $20,000 furniture set for Robyn's home office. Gasps filled the courtroom, and Janelle's blunt response cut like a knife. That wasn't an office. That was a throne. Mary's testimony carried a different kind of weight. For years, she had been sidelined, her role reduced, her voice muted, but in court, she exposed her loneliness. Shut out of the money, conned into thinking she had no claim to know anything, she testified that she found out only as much as there was to find out when the subpoenas arrived. Answers and receipts that linked her directly to the spending binge. When asked, she denied any familiarity with numerous of the documents. But Christine's attorney introduced text messages in which she coached Kody on how to move money in a hurry, asking him not to wait until the others ask. One message, read out in court, destroyed any pretense of innocence. For the other wives, it was the final straw. The unity that had once defined the Browns crumbled before the judge's eyes. Sisters who had stood together through years of public scrutiny now found themselves divided, their trust severed. Christine and Janelle stood shoulder to shoulder, fighting for accountability, while Mary's quiet pain told a story of deep emotional exile. And in the center, Kody and Robyn sat bare, their empire collapsing before our eyes. But as heart-stopping as the disclosures were, the real bombshell lay yet to come. Because what authorities discovered next wouldn't only establish fraud, it would seek to destroy the Browns' financial future altogether. The courtroom drama reached its peak when the final flood of evidence was revealed. Records which not only demonstrated mismanagement, but showed a deliberate attempt to bleed the family's coffers in manners that could no longer be rationalized as errors. Perhaps most astonishingly, one of the biggest surprises was a hidden line of credit taken out under the family trust. Kody and Robyn had co-signed nearly $400,000 in loans using family assets as collateral, without ever telling the other wives. Upon default on the loan, foreclosure notices began to circulate like vultures. The court no longer saw it as bad judgment. It was deliberate deception. The judge, clearly exasperated, read his decision with a tone of decisiveness. Kody and Robyn were held responsible for fraudulent misrepresentation, abuse of marital property, and financial concealment. The court directed them to pay millions, sell assets, and dispose of properties, such as the mansion Robyn had referred to as her forever home. Gasps echoed throughout the room as the verdict was handed down. Over $3 million in damages, immediate disposition of family assets, and strict monitoring of future income. At that moment, the once touted empire disintegrated before the eyes of the world. The consequences spread far beyond the courtroom. Christine and Janelle left not only as plaintiffs but as survivors, their will hardened by a decade of manipulation. Mary, quietly shattered, started the process of rebuilding life without trust but with dignity. And Kody, the proud patriarch, exited court no longer a leader, but a man shamed, weighed down by debt and the broken pieces of the family he purportedly guarded. For the viewers who watched the Browns, truth was as sensational as it was heartbreaking. The $80,000 nanny wage had been deemed outrageous, but a firestorm compared to the blaze of money lies and betrayals that ensued. The nest egg, a legacy for kids and grandchildren, turned out to be the very noose that tightened around Kody and Robyn's empire, gasping for its last breath. And thus, when the gavel came down and the final verdict rang out in the courtroom, the Browns' tale of reality television drama was rewritten into a morality tale of greed, deceit, and the cost of betrayal. The nest egg that was meant to rescue them had instead crushed them. And the one question which now remains to haunt every fan and every relative alike is quite simple. Was it ever truly about love and togetherness? Or was it always about control and cash?